Welcome. You have now entered the Freedom First podcast,
where we have conversations with some of the most interesting human beings on the planet.
People who live and breathe a Freedom First mentality. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for continuing to tune in. If this is your first time tuning in, I hope you enjoy the show today. We have a good one for you. I'm very excited to welcome our co-host Eric Kern back on the show. He's been busy with life in general, with work, with his new baby. So super stoked to have him join us today for an amazing episode. Hope everyone's having a happy and healthy new year in 2022, and hope you enjoy the episode. Today we have on just an amazing man through and through. He's a man of faith, a man of many titles. He's a businessman. He owns a Townsend architectural group, where he's an architect and, designs and builds many different things. He is a District 5 supervisor, and he's getting ready to run for re-election in 2022. So we talked about water. We talked about forest management, especially with the fires these last couple of years, and specifically the fires this year in his district. He's also working on, different water things. That's his focus, especially with agriculture in his district. We talked about his faith. We talked about his childhood growing up and, the people and the things that have made him who he is today. He shared just great pieces of wisdom with us, and I hope you guys can also take some of that with you as well. I hope you enjoy the conversation today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Dennis Townsend. Welcome to the podcast, Dennis. Thanks for your time today. I know you've been busy a lot, and we're going to the holidays here, and you're coming up for re-election next year. So thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for reaching out.
So on the Freedom First podcast, we have a little segment called the Freedom Minute. It's just some rapid fire questions to kind of get us fired up and get us flowing into the conversation. And the first question, the podcast is called the Freedom First podcast. So what does freedom mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Freedom is simply the absence of restraint. And you can think about it in a lot of different ways. We lock people up if they misbehave in society. They use their freedom to hurt someone else. So we lock them up. We take away that freedom. We put a restraint on them. And then when we let them go, they're free. I think about it spiritually. You think about it, if you're a Christian, you're in bondage. The Bible talks about being in bondage, to sin, being a slave to sin. But yet when you come to the Lord, you're free. And so there's a freedom that's in Christ. And then, politically, I think our founders were brilliant when they came up with the freedoms, because they tried to take as much restraint off of the individual as possible. And so in order to do that, they made limited government, and they put checks and balances. They tried to keep it small. And so today, I think we've all been experiencing a rapid decline in that freedom, because we've been seeing additional restraints come on. And so so freedom in a political sense or in a societal sense would be the removal, really, of those restraints to allow us to do anything that we want to do, to pursue happiness. And the pursuit of liberty is the pursuit of freedom, right? To be as rich as we want, as poor as we want, have as many friends or as few friends as we want, say what we want to say, do what we want to do. And, here in the United States, we're blessed to have that freedom, even though it's been eroding a little bit of late.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I mean, even though we've seen some of these setbacks, the one thing that's keeping it all together is the Constitution, right?
That's right.
And that document that the founders came up with, over 200 years ago. So that document, they were pretty brilliant when they came up with it.
They really were, and they even had a realization in there that we couldn't, even as a people, even as brilliant as we might be, as great as we might be, we had to also recognize that we aren't the final say. They said that, you can't have a people governed like this unless it's a people that believe in a higher being, people that believe in God, because there is that final judge. And so, we've been removing God out of the mix here over the past many years now in this country.
Yeah.
And sure enough, we saw those freedoms eroding, but it's still the greatest country on earth. And we haven't lost that. I'm not losing any hope. I think that we have people, well, like you guys and others that are looking and going, hey, we need to get back to that full-on freedom that comes from that thing called the Constitution.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. So a little less intellectual question, because that was an awesome first question, and very well spoken. So our second question is going to be, what was your first car?
Yeah.
Throw you for a loop right here.
Yeah. So I owned a 1963 Chevy 2, and not a cool Chevy 2, a grandpa car Chevy 2. It was fully oxidized blue paint. Absolutely. I think it had an AM radio. It had an AM radio.
Okay. Back when AM was cool.
Yeah, exactly. The metal dash, the hard seats. I think it had a straight 4 under the hood, maybe do 40 miles per hour downhill with a good breeze. A real chick magnet, what I'm talking about. That was the first one. Yep.
That's awesome.
What came after that?
So after that, I probably started to choose a little better. I found a 70 Chevy pickup, a fleet side pickup. When I bought it, it was lowered. It had side pipes on it that ran all the way down below the running boards, and it was a little bit rough. And I had an uncle that was in the paint and body business, so I got it painted a two-tone blue. Removed the side pipes, raised it up to the standard, put some nice tires and wheels on it, and drove that one for quite a while. In fact, I still miss that truck.
I'm surprised you don't still have it.
Yeah, I know. I should. It'd be worth something today.
Obviously, you've been successful in everything that you've done, and we in this life we don't do anything alone. It takes a lot of people to get us to where we are. So, with that being said, what is the best piece of advice you were given?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because there's so many good pieces of advice that I've been given over time, but a couple always rise, and they're really simple ones. It'll be funny when you hear it. But I was on a wrestling team that was getting ready to go to New Zealand for a summer and wrestle for about 3 weeks in New Zealand. And Tim Vanny was on that team as well, our local Olympian, 2-time Olympian here. So he and I were training, and they sent us to Chicago to train for a week before we went on this trip. And one of our trainers was one of the Olympic coaches. And so he gave us all these tidbits of information about wrestling. But he said one thing one day that has never left me. And you got to remember, this has been in the 70s, right? This is about 1977, 78, right in there. And I still remember it to this day. He was talking about discipline. And he says, you want to have a disciplined life. There's one thing I want you guys to do if you want to have a disciplined life. He says, when you crinkle up that piece of paper and throw it in the trash can and you miss the trash can and it lands on the floor, he said, go right then and pick it up every single time. Don't walk away. Go right to it, pick it up, put it in the trash can every time. And you kind of think as a kid, you're going, well, that's silly. I got an Olympic coach. He's telling me some kind of a silly piece of advice. If you do that, it creates this discipline, right? It's one little tiny thing. I mentioned the Bible earlier. You go back to the Bible, you look at Jesus' words. He said, be faithful in the little things, I'll make you master over much. And it's the same type of a principle. If you have that discipline in that small thing, then you will learn discipline in other areas. So that was one that's always stuck with me. And there's another one I want to share that's right there too. My stepdad, Noble Beeler, again, it was around wrestling, and we were I was just getting ready to go into high school, and I was doing these freestyle tournaments, which are open tournaments. You can wrestle any age group and different weight classes, but we were traveling all around the valley and going to these. And I was getting to where I could do pretty well, not great, but pretty well. And I saw this guy that I was about ready to wrestle, and he came out, and he was pretty muscled up, but he was very cocky, and he was actually wearing a cape and a top hat. I mean, it was like a big time wrestling, you know, is what it looked like when I saw this guy. But I mean, literally, it scared me, right? I saw this guy and thought, wow, he's got to be really good.
Yeah.
You know, he's going to whip me.
The confidence.
Because look at that confidence. He must be good. He's got so much confidence, you know. And my dad, Noble, he spotted that. I didn't say anything to him, but he spotted that. And he goes, yeah, look at that guy over there. I said, yeah, I was looking at it. I'm shaking. He goes, yeah. He goes, you know, sometimes people have to have a thing. He goes, that guy's got a thing. And he goes, you know, usually they have a thing because they're not that good.
Yeah.
And they're compensating for something. He goes, so really you need to be at the point where you don't have to have a thing. Yeah. Just be good. And you know what? I whooped that guy. I pinned him in the first round. And I was not even in high school. I was just getting but my dad was spot on with that. And so I've remembered that throughout my life in other situations, that you see someone or something or some group that's just really out there and just being really, really loud and obnoxious and you know, trying to maybe put this false sense of security that's out there. And you realize, you know what, that's just their thing. We need to be good instead of having a thing.
Yeah, it's always the insecurity, and we hear about like the bullies. You know, it's always that insecurity, or you know, that they have to be loud or something like that. And that's kind of relates to that. You know, it's just you have to have something that kind of gives you that. You know, like you said, the insecurity. Yeah. And I kind of like the first your first response, and I kind of do the same thing. Like when I'm at Target or something, so putting the shopping cart away. That's my thing. Yeah. So that discipline of, you know, just putting the shopping cart away. You know, even if it's like 30 rows down, you know, you just have to put that shopping cart away. Just that's my discipline thing. So
it's kind of funny, that peace of mind, you know.
Yeah, exactly. No matter what, I'm going to do it. Even no matter how, you know, if it's rainy, no matter what, I'm going to put that shopping cart away. So that discipline. So
that's awesome.
I really like that.
Yeah. I seen a few days ago, like there's a video that went viral, and it was a kid it was a basketball team, and they were walking out of the stadium or the arena, and they had just lost, I think. And one of the players that was first going in kicked the trash can over and like was mad, right? And one of the last players to leave, you know, he stayed behind and picked up trash, and he picked it all up out the trash can that the other player had kicked over, and he was up in the stands like picking up the trash, cleaning up the arena after the game. Wow. Not, you know, he didn't know there was a camera, like someone was like filming it, but he was just doing it because it was the right thing to do. Yeah. So going back to what you said,
Oh, that's great.
That disciplinary thing is, you know, like you said, just training yourself, you know, no matter what. And it's the little things in life, like you said, 1977, it's just stuck with you, and that's awesome. So
I'm always amazed when I think about that, you know, but and it's not just when I throw a piece of paper at the trash can and miss, you know, but it's other times too. And I just remember that all that time.
That's awesome. So our question 4 is going to be, I'm interested to hear this because you're you know, you are who you are, so it's awesome. So what was your most terrifying moment in your life?
Yeah. So, there's probably 2. Again, one, I'll tell you the furthest one away first, and that is growing up. I was going to say fat little kid. I was a fat big kid. I was always bigger than everyone, really heavy. So that self-confidence, even though I had great parents that would try to instill that, you know, just the self-image wasn't there. So as I got into high school, I got into, you know, football and into wrestling, weight training, and doing all this. And so my body, you know, changed, obviously, because of all that. And I had this cheerleader that was watching me. You know, this cute little blonde cheerleader was watching me, and I had not a clue she was watching me because I didn't think girls would be interested in this, you know, this fat kid. I still had that image, you know. In fact, I thought she was watching my buddy, Billy, who was my wrestling partner, because he looked like he was chiseled out of stone. You know, this guy looked like a Greek god, you know. Yeah. And she'd come in the wrestling room and she'd be watching, and he'd say, hey, look, she's checking me out. And I figured, yeah, she was. Well, one day she comes up, and Billy and I and several other guys are standing out here on the Monache's campus, and she comes up and taps me on the shoulder. She says, I'd like to talk to you. And so immediately fear, you know, came in. It's like, oh my gosh, this cute little blonde wants to talk to me. And literally turned to Billy and said, "Hey, she wants to talk to you." And she had to tug on my sleeve. She said, I'm talking to you. I want to talk to you. And she was going to ask me out to it was the Girl Ask Guy dance, the Hearts and
Sadie
Flowers.
Hawkins,
Sadie
yeah.
Hawkins, yeah, Hearts and Flowers, Menachie called it. And anyway, turns out this girl was Cece, who is my wife now.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
But that happened in 1977. Again, that's a big year.
It's a big year for you.
Yeah. 1977. And so, yeah, but that moment struck fear into my heart. Of course, after I realized she wanted to talk to me and ask me out, then that was the start of something great, and a change in my life and a move in a different direction and a wonderful marriage. But that was one. Another one that was a little bit more recent, when I had come into having my own architectural business and trying to get to know everyone in town as a professional. I was asked by a fairly prominent member of the community to come and speak at a building industry association meeting to be the main speaker, and to go it was over lunch, at a restaurant, and so all of the people that would be hopefully would be my clients in town would be there at this meeting listening to me talk about architecture and these things that I should know a lot about, right? Well, I go to that, and I'm eating my meal, and it was something hot, a hot meal, and I noticed I was starting to perspire a little bit, beating up, and then I said, "Man, can they turn the AC down in here? It's about, it's 100 and something outside." They said, "Wow, the AC just broke down." I said, "Oh, great, So I'm starting to sweat, and I think I might have even had a little fever. Might have been what the deal was, because I started to sweat like profusely, and then it came my time to talk, and so I had to complete this 20-minute or so talk in front of all these people who I really respected and really would like to have their business while I'm profusely sweating. It was like one of the old Saturday Night Live skits, where the water's shooting out of their pores. It was just about that bad. And so that was a point that I just didn't want to relive. I had one friend that was in that group that came and talked to me afterwards. I kind of told him what was going on, but I was just so embarrassed when that was over, and walked away. Hey, thankfully all those people are my friends today and have been clients, and
Yeah.
but that was terrifying.
I know you speak a lot, and do you still get nervous and butterflies before you speak in front of large groups?
I do. I'm actually a very introverted person down at the base level. That's just how I am. My wife has brought that out of me tremendously over the years, because she's been the extrovert. But the more that I do it, it does seem to get better. But there's still the nerves ahead of time.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I'm like Eric mentioned earlier before we jumped on the podcast. I've always been really quiet, introverted.
Yeah.
But now having to speak, being involved in education, athletic director.
Yeah.
The other night, had to speak in front of a couple hundred people at a banquet, and man, I get really nervous still. And we're very hypercritical of ourselves and,
Sure.
and things like that. That the successful people, I feel like. So I just had that question that popped up.
Still happens.
Yeah, I'm the person who's always trying to be the the center of attention in the room, but when I jump on this podcast, I feel like I'm the most nervous person in the world. So it switches roles. When you want the attention, but when it's actually on you, it's kind of opposite. So.
Yeah.
Right.
Last question. We actually we asked this question to all of our guests, and if you could sit down and have a conversation with anyone throughout the history of the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Yeah, what a great question. There's so many to choose from. There's a couple of people that I've really love the way that they phrase things, really love the way that they speak. We were talking about the Founding Fathers earlier, and you look at their writings and how nicely they put things, and succinctly, and just the words and the amount of words that they use, the scope of words that they have, that they can use. I would say things like the Apostle Paul, right? Of course, he speaks in run-on sentences all the time. If you ever read him,
Yeah.
But there is one that I really thought would be just fascinating to sit down with, And that's Francis Schaeffer. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Francis Schaeffer or not, but he wrote, many books. And one was called How Should We Then Live? And what Francis Schaeffer was, he's passed away now, but he was a philosopher. He was an art historian, architectural historian. And what he would do is he would go through all of human history, and he would look at it. He would look at the way we developed over our history and the sort of the rise and fall of empires and things. And he would look at it from the perspective of art and architecture and music. And he would tie that all together, and he would bring in biblical references to it as well, spiritually what's going on and how's that reflected in art and architecture. And my wife and I, when we're, a lot of times we see things that are happening on the news right now, and it brings us back to something that, Francis Schaeffer said, many years ago, or in that, I actually made a video series called How Should We Then Live, that goes through the different 8 periods. And, that he would talk about how life is either, or how art is either predicting life or reflecting life. I don't think he's the one that coined that phrase, but he would use that often, and he would actually show examples. And so, being an architect, being a Christian, now being in politics, all those things all come together. And so it would really be fascinating to sit down with him and just pick his brain about all these things.
Yeah, because a lot of the time, like you said, it has a lot to do with yourself, and everything that he kind of tied to, like you said, Francis Schaeffer, kind of everything that he does is kind of a reflection of what you do as well. Like you said, architecture and just the voice of that. So I kind of want to hear the story of Dennis Townsend, how it started. How, like you said, you're an architect, you're a politician, and I just kind of want to dive in. How did this all happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, like what was your childhood like growing up and all those things?
Yeah, right. Well, so I was born and raised in Porterville, and my father died when I was 5 years old. His name was Darwin Townsend, and in fact, his name was Darwin Cicero Townsend, because I think our grandma and grandpa Townsend were naming their sons and daughters for famous people. So he had Darwin, and he had Cicero both in his name. One of my uncle's name, they call him, he's back in Texas or New Mexico, one or the other, a bunch of them live back there. But anyway, his name is, they called him Rafel. I was like, Rafel, that's an interesting name. Where did Rafel come from? Yeah. And they wrote it out one day, and it's Raphael. And so he was named for the Renaissance painter and sculptor Raphael, but they called him Rafel because they're from Texas. But anyway, so he passed away when I was 5. So and I had 2 brothers, Dwayne, who passed away last year, my older brother, and then Donnie, who lives down south now. So Dwayne, Donnie, and I living right there in the home that I was born in. Anyway, Mom raised us for several years there, and then she met who I call Dad now, which is our stepdad, Noble Beeler. And so he was in a wheelchair. He had polio when he was younger, and when I think he was 16. And so he had a lot of good things to teach us about independence and about dealing with adversity, in his life. And so so Mom did a great job, with us, up until then, and then Dad and Mom did a great job, raising us up. They added one more to our family. They had my little sister, Denise, came in through Dad, and anyway, we're just growing up on that street. In that time, and this gets back to kind of the question about how do I get here. Dad would like to teach us skills. He was really good about teaching us skills. And one day he says, all right, we're going to, and he called me Rufus, by the way. He had a nickname for most everybody, right? So my nickname was Rufus. I looked up the meaning of that. It means red-haired. Now, I wasn't red hair, but I did have kind of a red beard when it had color in it. It was kind of red. But anyway, he called me Rufus. And he says, Rufus, we're going to go build a shed in the backyard. I said, wow, that'd be great. So that day, we started with nothing, and we ended up with pretty much the frame of a shed and the roof on there by the end of the day. Learned how to, hammer some nails, learned how to use a skill saw, jigsaw, all those things. I was super excited about seeing something going from nothing to a structure over the course of a day. And so I ran in to grab some iced tea, and Mom was in the kitchen, and I said, Mom, I know what I'm going to do. I think I was 12 years old. Mom, I know what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And she said, oh, what's that? I said, I'm going to be a contractor. I'm going to build things because I love this. This is awesome, And she says, very encouraging, and she says, well, that's great. That'd be a wonderful career to get into, be a contractor. And then there was a little silence while we're making my tea and everything. And then she says, is it kind of warm out there today? And it was like 100 degrees, And I said, yeah, it's hot out there today. And she paused a little bit. And she goes, when you get a little older, like your dad and I, and it gets to be 100 degrees outside, you may not want to be working out in the heat. You might be able to find a job, a career where you could be involved with construction without being out hammering nails or being on your knees, when it's really hot outside and when you get a little older. And she goes, and you're really smart. You could do whatever you wanted to do. So maybe you can figure something out where you can do that. Well, what popped immediately to mind was the Brady Bunch. And Michael Brady, he was an architect. Because I didn't know any architects, but there was a TV architect there. And I remember those scenes where they'd go into his office and he'd have all these plans, on his desk and everything. And he was involved in that, the blueprints. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to be an architect. And so from 12 years old, I had that in my mind, I'm going to be an architect. And so all the way through school, that was the focus of going to, there wasn't a lot at the time to take it in high school like there is now with choosing pathways where you can go into architecture and get that kind of training. So it's just all of the math and some of the drafting classes, and then COS and Cal Poly both had architectural programs, and so that was where my sights were set on. And so I just had Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo in mind to get that architectural degree as I started to go closer to it. So I got into wrestling and football in high school, and then went ahead and wrestled for COS for 2 years, and then went to Cal Poly San Luis and wrestled for 2 years for them, and took the architectural courses at the same time. Led me to taking my 5th year. Architecture is a 5-year major. Mm-hmm. So it led me to the 5th year. There was an option, or there was a program where you could study abroad, and so they offered Florence, Italy. It was one of the ones that was offered, and I said that would be perfect, to go to Florence to study architecture and actually live there a year. I was already married, and so wife and I prayed about it, applied for the program, got accepted, and lived that last year in Italy. Then ended up coming back here after that wonderful year, and both of our families were here. So came back here, started working for a civil engineer in town, and because there were no architects, so worked for Wayne F. Harris and Associates. And then when he closed his business, sold his business to Jim Winton, I worked on my own for a little bit, and then R.L. Schaefer hired me. I worked there for 12 or 13 years, and then started the business with the owners of Venice Homes at the time. We partnered up in Townsend Architectural Group, and so that was it. I figured that's where I would be, architecture, all that time. Somewhere in there, Jim Maples, who was the 5th District Supervisor before Mike Ennis, he was teaching some architectural drafting and building codes classes out at Porterville College, and he would ask me from time to time to come and guest lecture for him. And so I would go out and do that, teach a night class or something. Then one day he said, hey, can you take this class for several weeks? I said, sure, what's going on? He said, well, I'm running for supervisor of Tulare County. And I asked the logical question, what's a supervisor? So that was my first hint at what the Board of Supervisors was about. And so between him putting the bug in my ear, he actually asked me to run, and architecture was just booming, and I said thanks, but no thanks whenever he retired. And then Mike Ennis came in, and then Mike got me plugged into the Tulare County Association of Governments as an at-large member, gave me another exposure to a lot of the local politics and politicians. And then when Mike was ready to retire, he pretty much put the word out that I was going to run for his position, and that's what led me to it. And after lots of prayer and consideration, we decided to go for it. And now I'm completely in love with the position. I think it's a wonderful spot to be. I feel like I just couldn't feel more sure of anything than this is where I'm supposed to be for this particular time.
That's awesome.
So I want to back up just a little bit.
Sorry, covered my whole life.
Yeah. So no, I want to back up to kind
too.
of some of the things. And I want to kind of go back to wrestling. We've had a few different wrestlers and MMA people on this podcast that have had a wrestling background, and they all kind of talk about the just the lessons that they learned and that helped them get through life and have success. So you were part of the 1978 Wenatchee wrestling team that went undefeated, coached by Drew Williams. Tim Vanny was a part of that team. The Dellas and many others that I'm sure you'll mention right now. But you went on to wrestle at COS. So talk about that dynamic, wrestling. Having a lot of success in high school, then carrying to college, and then what were some of the lessons you learned, and how did that help you kind of get into your life and the lessons that you were able to instill into architecture and now being of service and being in the a public official?
Sure. Yeah. I think wrestling is it's a wonderful sport. It certainly was great for me. I opened up so many opportunities and so many. I got to meet so many people and learn so many lessons, like you're mentioning. Coming into Wenatchee, Coach Drew Williams is pretty much legendary around here. I mean, he's been inducted into the California Wrestling Hall of Fame as well. Went to that ceremony, and deservingly, because he poured his whole life into teaching, this group of young men, actually this group of boys, and teaching them how to be men. A lot of those things about discipline and self-respect and respect for others and fair play, the work ethic, all of that teamwork, all of it was part of it. I vividly remember going into the wrestling room for the first time, and there were posters all around the wrestling room with little pithy sayings. It's not the size of the fight, not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. Mm-hmm. That's one. Yeah. One that aim for the stars. If you don't get there, you'll land pretty high anyway. Those types of things that we're all familiar with. There was one that's always that I've always liked, and it was excuses are the pillars of mediocrity that build a monument to nothing. And that was on the wall in the wrestling room, and I thought, wow, what. Let that sink in for a little bit, over your whole life. Why can't I? How come I'm not doing this? Well, it's because of you, or it's because of you, or it's because of that. Those are excuses. Those are the pillars of mediocrity that build a monument to nothing. So in other words, don't use excuses. There's no excuses. Just do it. Go out there and do your job. And so, Coach Williams instilled those types of things, those types of ethics, I think, into those teams over many years. He did that. That particular team you're talking about, that was a wonderful time, where we were, when I graduated, we'd gone 7 years without losing a dual meet. So I was, involved in 4 years of that.
Yeah. It was like 40 something and
It was actually 78.
So you guys, were like 44 or 40,
over 4 years.
Like that.
Yeah,
4 years.
Right. Cause you had 10 matches over the season. And so for the 4 years, that was 40-0 or, part of that I was varsity. So maybe 30-0 when I was there. But anyway, a very winning team. And interestingly, you look around and some were really, we mentioned, Tim Vanny, just very talented and took that on. And then others of us were kind of like, I was never all that naturally athletic, kind of clumsy, not really super coordinated, but just the value of learning the value of hard work. There's a real interesting aspect as well of wrestling, because I love football too. That was a lot of fun playing football, and it was a team sport. Wrestling, though, it goes back to that excuses thing. It becomes an individual sport. It is a team sport. you're keeping all of your scores. You know, you add them up, and there's one of the teams wins. But every time you go out, it's just you and the other guy.
Right.
You know, so now all the excuses are gone. It's just a test of yourself against that other person on that given day. That's really kind of more like life than anything else. There is a lot of teamwork involved in life, yes, but it's a little secondary because every day, you know, when you make the choice to get up and when you make the choice to do this, that, and the other thing in your job, it's really just you against whatever that is out there, whatever that task or that obstacle that's out there. So I really loved that, those types of lessons from wrestling.
Who was your football coach at that time?
Well, Dorrance Rice was the head football coach. Yeah,
Dorrance is my our freshman, freshman coach and my JV coach.
Yeah. And so great guy,
great man.
Yep. I haven't. Yeah, I used to run into him in the gym all the time. We used to overlap in the mornings, and he was just going. You know, he was another one of those that would teach you that type of thing. I one day we did a senior ditch day, right? All the seniors
probably didn't like that.
And so, well, of course, he's a teacher, so he knows we're gone, you know. And so we come back, but we made it back for football practice. You know, we knew we weren't going to miss football practice, so everybody comes back for football practice, and he says, "Okay, you know, all you seniors, everybody that was out there ditching, get out there. You're going to run belly slammers, you know, where you run 10 yards and hit the dirt and get up and run 10 yards." And so he made us do that until we were all, falling over, tired. And I had one of them. I started to catch myself with my hands, and one time putting my hands down, and I broke my finger. It actually tore a ligament in my ring finger, and it just bent it over sideways 90 degrees, and just and so hurt like crazy. And I went up and said, "Coach, I'm injured," and he says, what's wrong? I said, "Well, I hurt my finger." He's like, "Oh, poor baby, hurt your finger. I don't see any blood."
Are you hurt or injured?
Yeah, he hurt or injured.
Exactly. And so he wasn't even gonna move until I grabbed my finger and bent it the wrong way, sideways. And he goes, "Oh, all right, get in there." He was still mad. Get in there. Go take care of it. Had a little surgery on that to take care of it. But anyway, he was another one with, just heart of gold, but really tough coach. Absolutely. To just make you man up and do the right thing, and you will respect, the officials, and you will respect the coaches, and you will respect the other team.
Absolutely.
As well. So good lessons there too.
Yeah. He was all about respect, no profanity, very, very, very tough, but very fair.
Right.
Always very fair.
If you do something, do it the right way. That's,
that's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to go back to you doing your 5th year in Italy and you being an architect. Tell us about that, because obviously that's two dynamics of probably a big part of your life. So I kind of want to talk about that
with art, that's the mecca of the world.
Raphael or Raffle.
I
kind of want to talk about that a little bit. So
so I had the opportunity. I mentioned one of those. I'd had the opportunity to travel quite a bit because I was also in the Wenatchee High Band, and we went to, in my sophomore year, we went to England, Scotland, and Ireland. We did the British Isles. So I was able to travel there with my mom and dad. We had taken several road trips on successive summers around the United States. So I'd probably, been to 40 of the contiguous, United States, been down to Mexico a little bit. So, I had been able to do a lot of just quick travels. Then I went to New Zealand, as I mentioned, and then my senior year went to Germany on another wrestling team and wrestled in Germany for, New Zealand for 3 weeks, Germany for 3 weeks. So anyway, a lot of good opportunities to travel around. My wife had only been to one other state because her dad was a pilot for Rain for Rent out of Bakersfield. And so he would every once in a while take the kids to, someplace. And I think she went to Oregon with him. And so I was, looking at her and saying, man, it would be great for her to be able to travel. And this program came up. And then I thought I would love to travel and stay for a little while, really get immersed in a culture for a little while. So when the program came up through Cal Poly to go study architecture, I jumped at the chance to do it. And so it was a great program because they would just rent a building or a portion of a building. They would hire all Italian instructors, but they could speak English. And then the first month that we were there, it was actually a little longer, the first 7 weeks I think we were there, all we did was learn the Italian language. So we could cope, we could live in Italy.
Yeah.
And So that was already great. And then I continued to take courses in conversational Italian because I had most of my course studies were done by the time I got over there. So so my wife and I were able to, you find an apartment. Our landlady happened to be my Italian language instructor. I still remember her name was Mima Califano. She was about 5'0" a little fire plug. But, we would go in for the architectural classes, and we go in and be talking about a particular building, in a particular period, a lot of Renaissance architecture, obviously. And so we'd be talking about a particular building in the morning, and they say, okay, we're going to go have lunch, and then we'll see you at that building. So you can just walk across town and you were at the building.
How cool is that?
Lecturing
That's awesome.
on. Yeah. And it was so much, there was so much architecture, so much art that it became, it was almost overwhelming. There was so much there, that it was almost, I think we were there for 11 months. We stayed a little longer, and probably would have stayed even longer if our money wouldn't have run out. Or broke college students, But no, it was a wonderful experience, getting immersed in another culture, making some friends there. It makes you appreciate the United States.
Yeah.
Appreciate the government you have. I asked one of my Italian buddies about his government. He says, "Oh yeah, we have a lot of." I said, "We have pretty much a 2-party system, but there might be a third party jump in." And then he goes, "Oh yeah, we have. I think it was like 19 at the time, parties, and including the Communist Party was one of the parties that would run every time, And so just a real convoluted sort of a thing. And I remember also vividly from this experience, you're all these college students, and you're wondering about the world. You're forming, your sense of where you're going to be going and what your political views are going to be and your spiritual views, and you're just becoming your own person. So there were several college students that really wanted to go to Moscow, and there was an opportunity to go over there and stay for 4 or 5 days in Moscow. I didn't have any desire, but there were several of them that were of the opinion that the United States was, not the best country on earth, and they'd like to go see another one. They'd like to see all the lies that we've been telling about, Russia. So they go to this thing. When they came back, they were changed because they spent I think it was a little under a week there, and they saw the oppression. They saw the lack of freedom. We talked about that first. Mm-hmm. They saw that lack of freedom over there, and they were singing a different tune when they came back. Now, I didn't see that, I didn't see that oppression, but I saw enough to make you long for the real absolute freedoms, that we have here compared to other countries. So travel is also good in that perspective.
Sounds like we need to take 50% of the country over there to Russia.
Just take a look.
Yeah,
just take a little gander.
You talk to anybody that's traveled, and they most of them say the same thing. It gives you an appreciation for the United States and America, where we're from. So
yeah, for sure.
So you spend time in Italy, obviously the mecca of architecture in the world, going back to the Renaissance and all that. But you end up coming back to Porterville. So what was that choice of coming back to your hometown? And you kind of mentioned you started working for some different groups and different architectural firms. So what was that basic dynamic, and what led you to eventually starting your own group?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so the big thing was, when I was going to Cal Poly, loved the Central Coast. And so there was a real temptation to want to live there. Of course, like every other architectural student that comes through Cal Poly, they all want to live there.
Yeah.
So it would be pretty hard to get a job there. But that was, a draw, let's live here on the Central Coast. Then going to Italy, getting exposed to that, loving travel, loving that aspect of it. There was the draw to, well, maybe we should travel. Maybe we should live in different places. And my wife and I, we talked about all of these things. We were actually offered positions in different places and different states, and even in other countries. Through our church we were involved in, we were offered to stay in Italy to work with some missionary groups that were over there. There was really a real temptation for us, but we really prayed about it. We really discussed it, and both of our families were right here in town, right here in Porterville. family's huge, for us. We love both of our families, and there's not really a lot of there's no real big stress or anything between the two families either. So we're all kind of one big family, friends all here, and so we made just a real definite decision to say we really need to be back where our family is.
That's awesome.
And so that's what brought us back here. I didn't have at the time any real, there wasn't a real desire just to go out and start my own company. In fact, I didn't think about that at all going through school. I'd always just would work for someone. There were no architects in Porterville. There were a couple of civil engineers. I had already worked for the one civil engineer, which was Wayne F. Harris. And he had said when I got out of school that there would be a job opening already waiting. So that was prearranged. So I was able to come right back in and plug in with Wayne Harris. And again, I stayed with him until he sold his business to Jim Winton after Jim Winton left R.L. Schaefer. So it was kind of this big kind of a circle. But then, so it's been 20, I think we've been in business now 20 years this year as Townsend Architectural Group. So
congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I guess it would have been about 21 years ago. I got a call from Brian Ennis here in town. He had Ennis Homes. He and his sister Pam and their dad began a family business, and they were really on the upward swing of building lots and lots of homes and some commercial buildings. And he basically offered me to come and work for them and be their architect and just do their work, which I thought was a great offer. It was very nice of them. I was humbled that they would offer me that. However, I had a bunch of commercial clients that had built up over the years, and I didn't really want to just narrow it down to just doing production residential for one company. So he had offered, and I said thanks, but turned that down. And then a few weeks would go by, and he'd offer something else, and this went on for a couple of months. They just kept asking, and so at one point I was actually at a family reunion in New Mexico, and Brian had called and he said, what if we form a partnership? What if you do all of our work, but you still pursue all of your other work that you want to do, and it can be a different entity. You won't be working, for Ennis, but it'll be, call it what you want, Townsend Architectural. So with that one, prayed about that, asked one of my uncles who had a good business over in Odessa, Texas. I asked him about that, and respect his opinion, and he told me that it sounded like everything was lined up that I should take that offer, and so I did, and we started that, and we went for the next 7 years as partners, and then actually just before everything crashed on the housing side, we split the partnership and ended up taking that as a sole proprietorship for Townsend Architectural. It's just been going that way ever since, through the ups and the downs, and
awesome.
and we've just had a lot of great experiences with it.
So I kind of have a silly question, and we're talking about this, but what exactly does an architect do? Because obviously, you've obviously heard the term architect, but what exactly do you do?
Yeah, and that's a great question, really, because it's sort of like a supervisor. Not many people really know what they do. So architecture it's actually a licensed activity in the United States. So I practice under a state license to be an architect. It's a pretty intensive test. You have to have your 5-year major, your bachelor's in architecture, and then there's a 4-day test. 3 of those days are 8 hours, and one's 12 hours.
That's pretty tough.
And after you get past all that, I think it took me. They used to be offered only once a year, and they've accelerated that now, where you can get in. But I think I took it. I think the third time it's when I finally passed. I passed. I think there's 10 segments. I passed 8 the first time, and it took me the next 2 years to pass the other 2, which were the longer ones. Mm-hmm. And after you do that, and you show that you've had your 2-year apprenticeship under an architect, mm-hmm. Then they invite you back for an oral exam with 3 people firing questions at you, and that's how you get it. So, but what it is you become almost yes, you're a designer, and yes, you produce the plans, but you kind of become, it's almost like a conductor of an orchestra, because you have like civil engineers that would be sub-consultants to you, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, structural engineers. And you're bringing all of those design professionals together, producing not only the design that you'll produce, but then coming up with the construction documents that they can use then to permit that project and to actually build that project out. And so that's the difference. Is it is a licensed. I'm licensed to do some structural engineering, to a point, some civil engineering to a point, and but really it's kind of the one that's kind of the conducting that whole orchestra of designers.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you've kind of learned along the way, like whether it's failures or mistakes in the architecture world?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most glaring ones was in that build up to the sort of the housing crash in 2007. It was really, I mean, there was as much work as you wanted. It was just walking in the door, and to the point where you start to just take advantage of this is always going to be. Mm-hmm. Even though I knew better, and everybody in the industry knew better. They knew it was a cyclical type of an industry. But it was so good for so many years that as that was coming in, I would just hire as many people as I could. If you walked in the door and could draft it all, it was like, okay, you're hired. Sit over there. Put you in the closet. Put you over here. Just wherever there was a hole, a seat, just put them there. And so we did that, and sort of didn't pay attention to what you knew was coming. You knew there was going to be a downturn coming. And so when the downturn hit, it hit so hard that it took a lot of people all the way out of business. And it took me I was that close. I was within an inch. I mean, I was literally, I got down to where it was myself and my one employee that I've had the longest. It was just the two of us sitting there, and I told him I've got one more payroll. That's all I've got.
Jeez.
Wow. We're down to it because I'd borrowed to the hilt. I did everything I could to try to keep the group together, and I was done. And so that day came. I said, okay, we're past that. I'll give you all these references. Here's letters. Here's all this. It has nothing to do with you. We don't have anything. Mm-hmm. And so I literally sat in my office and with nothing to do, just calling, looking, for quite a while. And at one point, I literally looked up and said, God, did you have a different plan for me? Because this one's not working anymore. I thought this was the best one, but it doesn't seem like it's working anymore. And it was really within about a week of that sort of desperation prayer that a little job here and there would start to trickle in. I mean, a chicken coop, a doghouse, whatever, something would trickle in. And so I was able to pull my one guy back and then start to sort of rebuild from there. But so I think the one thing I learned is you always have to prepare for the downtime. In the good times, you got to be preparing, for the bad times. And I knew it, but didn't put it into practice as much as I should have.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's, I think Blaine had to go use the restroom. He could cut it out. He's probably got to use the restroom, but that's.
Well, I'll do real quickly. I'll just put that into perspective with today, like with the county. That's one of the things I'm really proud about with the county of Tulare is that over the past many years, they have been very conservative fiscally.
Yeah,
and so they really set us up as a supervisor, as the board that's there now. They've set us up to where we can continue those types of policies. And when the pandemic hit, and we weren't really sure what 2020 was going to look like, so we were ready. To pull in to make ends meet if we had to, because it'd been so conservative fiscally up until then. So they really have been doing it right, and this board continues to do that right. And so we did very well over the past year.
Is there a project or a job that you did that just sticks out to you that was probably like what's your best work that you remember? Not necessarily best work, but the one you remember the most.
So just the other day, I went and presented a certificate of appreciation to the Knights of Columbus here in town on their 100-year anniversary in town, and so they're part of the St. Anne's parish, Catholic parish here. Well, so all those years ago, we designed Holy Cross Church, and to me, it still stands out as one of my favorite ones, and for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not Catholic, and I had never designed a Catholic church before. I wasn't really familiar with all the aspects of the liturgy of Catholicism. So to design a very large church that that they could feel at home in, and that they could worship in the way that they're used to, was a new thing for me. For my denomination, the church was pretty much a box. You just use it. It's multi-purpose room kind of was the church. For them, it was more the sacred, the holy place. I'd seen it in Italy. That was a good thing.
That's what I was thinking of right now.
But anyway, and then Father Scott, who's now Monsignor Scott Doherty here, he actually was the one that told the committee that he wanted locals to do this. And when you say, well, how many local architects did you have to choose from? Well, there was
there's only one.
And so he really sold that. In fact, I went to the first building committee meeting. There's probably 30 people on their building committee. And the very first question they asked was, "Are you Catholic?" That was one of those terrifying moments.
Yeah,
so
that was the third answer.
And I said, actually, I'm not Catholic.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian, but I'm not in the Catholic denomination. And they said, well, what are you? And I said, well, I'm a kind of a Baptist-costal. So a little bit of a laugh, and then I explained, but it's basically what I told them is I said, look, I'm a blank slate for you. I'm not coming in with preconceived ideas about what you want. I'm going to facilitate you telling me how you want to worship, how you want to use this facility. I'll then make that into 3 dimensions that you can use. And if you don't like it, you just get rid of me. But I think it's going to be an advantage to you because I'm not coming with I don't want to put my overlay on it. It's going to be you.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it turned out to be a really pleasant experience. Father Scott he described himself as a frustrated architect. He had really been interested in architecture early on in his life. And he had some great ideas. And so we went all the way from, it being an ultra modern kind of a facility to then saying, no, we can't do that to this community. That's not what they really want here, even though it might be a lot of fun for us. Let's go back to a more traditional and so you had this sort of mission style, and then I still had the Italian style in my mind, and so you can see when you go, it's kind of a blend of those things. But the process, it took many years to get there, but the process of designing that was one of my most favorite designs.
Awesome. Yeah.
What's a project like that? Like, how long does it take, number one, and is there a lot of research, like you're going and visiting, traveling different places and looking at different styles? How does that whole process look like? Yeah,
depending on the project, that one did take a few years in design. There were some stops and starts and some changes, along the way. There was go to a certain point and wait for the budget to catch up, and there were things like that happened. And it did involve, in this case, several meetings looking through a lot of published works of other architects who had designed Catholic churches, and looking at also some very old Catholic churches to how they functioned traditionally, and but it's kind of that way with any design project, that you do look at all of that background. You do take trips if needed to see some things that you can use as reference, and then you go from all that's forming in your mind to at some point you're putting it on paper, saying, okay, what about this? And then you start throwing darts at it, right? And saying, okay, this is good, but I hate that, I love that, I hate that. And you start morphing this thing into what everybody, especially the end user, wants to see it be. So it's a great process.
Is there a lot of emotion in that? Because obviously it's your work, and you obviously want it to be perfect, and you have this design in your head and you're working on it. Is there a lot of, what emotions are you feeling while you're doing this, and obviously the creativity wise?
Yeah, I mean, I literally will have dreams about projects, nightmares maybe you might call them sometimes. I've had, you get writer's block, like, writers talk about. You get the same thing when you're designing. I've had things where there's a project that I have a meeting with someone tomorrow, and I don't have anything on paper yet because I haven't got the concept. I've got I just haven't got the chance to, and then I'll have a dream or just sit there quiet and have a thought and start to sketch. We did as a spinoff, really, from Holy Cross Church, we did St. Charles Borromeo in Visalia. We did the design for that church, which is being constructed right now. That was one of those where I needed to meet with them. They liked Holy Cross, but of course they didn't want it just to be another Holy Cross. They wanted it to be their own entity. And one day I was sketching, and it was probably the day or two. It was probably 2 or 3 days before I was going to have this meeting, and I started sketching almost on a napkin, just on the back of a piece of paper. And it was about probably 1 inch by 1 inch or 1.5 by 1.5. And I did just a little doodle of a side chapel for a church, just what it would look like, and some of the buttresses that would be on it. I remembered seeing things like it. And I thought, I really like the way that looks. And so I took that and did another little doodle over here, and I had a whole series of little, almost Post-it, Post-it pads, almost that size of sketches. And so I had about, 8 or 10 of those of different little vignettes of areas. And I thought, man, I can't just take those into a meeting, and meet with this building committee.
Yeah.
I've got to do something different. So we, took all those and scanned them into the computer, scaled them up appropriately, and just put them all on one of our title blocks. But they were still those original sketches, just scans of those that were brought in. And I took that, and that's what I presented. And remember, that's happening over 3 or 4 days before I was having this, prearranged meeting. But that's when the juices started finally flowing. And so take that in and presented it. And that very first one, that little side chapel sketch, it was probably inch by an inch. It was blown up to where it looked like it was that big, but it was really an inch by inch. That sold it.
Really?
That's what they liked. They said, we like that. And that was the first thing that had come to mind. That was that first little spark after all the, where's the design? Where's the inspiration? It was that one little thing, and that's what they liked.
That's what it takes.
So does that happen often, to where you just kind of get this idea in your mind, you're like, I have to put it on paper? Like, to me, obviously, maybe you're not even working, maybe at home. And does that happen often, to where something just pops in your head and you're like, this is it?
Yeah, I think so. It's hard. And you guys will know, anybody knows that's just busy with things, is you just get so much. There's so much busyness, going on, that when you need to be creative, it's really hard. And so you have to almost get that time where you just say, okay, stop, and think about this thing for a little while.
Right.
And that's why I think sleeping sometimes is when that happens. Is when you wake up and go, oh wow, I just had a dream, about, or I saw this thing. So it's when you're quiet. It does happen fairly often. Unfortunately, a lot of times it happens really close to the deadline.
Yeah.
That does tend to happen.
I only ask that because the same thing happens to me. You kind of, like you said, writer's block or something comes to your head. You can't think of something, and then all of a sudden you're not even doing anything relative to it, and it just comes to your head, and you're just like, oh,
right.
yeah. And I'm sure that happens to you, with your work.
It does. And then I've always liked to doodle as well. So sometimes I'll be on the phone, and I'll just be almost mindlessly just doodling things. And they're not usually architectural things, usually just shapes. And I've got several that I've saved over the years, that some we've framed and actually have on the wall at my office. But it's sometimes people will look and think, man, he's not paying attention, but I am. It's just that somewhere in my brain, there's this, so I just need to be doing something over here, with this drawing with this hand.
Yeah.
Were you that kid in class that was drawing shapes and stuff on the paper?
In class and in church, I remember being reprimanded several times by my mom as I'm drawing. My brother, your dad, your grandfather were all involved with cars, and so it didn't quite rub off on me as much as Dwayne was into it. But I did draw a lot of cars when I was a kid. Usually, I was making those drawings in church and getting in trouble for it.
That whole mindset, that creativity. It reminds, a lot of, like you said, a lot of writers have that same thing. I'm not necessarily a huge Stephen King fan or necessarily, but I was reading his book, Stephen King on Writing, on the craft. And he talks about, like, people always ask him, like, how do you come up with these projects? Do you kind of think them out? He's like, no, like, most of the time it's just an idea that pops in my head and I write it on a napkin or something. Wow. And that's the idea for the book. Maybe it's a word, sometimes just a word or an idea. And then I create the story around that idea. but it's not like this whole thought out process of this whole book I had, this story. It's like, no, idea just pops in my head, kind of like how you were saying.
That's really interesting. That's another one of those things I think would be fun to try sometimes, is to write, a book, but I think along those lines, you'd probably have to have, well, what is it that I'm passionate about that I want to write about? My niece and we have one of my wife's twin sister's daughter, is like a daughter to us. And so I would always take her out on these father-daughter kind of dates, as she was growing up, and we would play little games and things. But one of the things that she was really into, reading books and watching movies, and so we always talked about writing a book together. Well, she started one just before she's moved away now, but she started one for probably the year before, and we would get together weekly and just go over her progress on it. And that was really an interesting process, just like you said, trying to get that idea, what comes next, how do you put it together, and I'd like to do that someday. Yeah,
it's awesome. What are some of the, obviously the church has kind of its own dynamic, but you've done a lot of other buildings and different types of architecture. Are there trends that kind of come and go, and like what's popular right now, and how does that kind of work?
Yeah, we're this area. We're always kind of behind whatever trend is out there. We're probably 2-3 years behind in this area. We don't tend to just grab onto them and go. Financial trends, you can see those a little bit more, because I remember going through the whole, if you're doing homes, let's say residences, make them bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and bigger roofs and taller ceilings, and they just got huge. Until we designed a whole series of production homes that were, I think the smallest one was 5,000 square feet at one point in time. Almost immediately following that was a contraction of that, where people go, man, that's too much. It's conspicuous consumption. I don't like that, and they didn't like that sociologically anymore, and financially it wasn't making any sense, and energy wise, the high ceilings and trying to heat and cool as energy prices went up. So all of a sudden this started contracting back down to getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller homes. And today, what are we talking about? Tiny homes. Right? You're talking about homes that are on the size of the trailer. So it's very interesting, the expansion contraction. You can see it in residential quite a bit. Stylistically, especially here, we've remained pretty consistent. You see a little bit of modern trends happening, but mostly what you see modern trends is just with the materials, not necessarily the design. And so you see more modern materials being used as they become more mainstream here. And of course, energy efficiency is being driven by costs and by legislation both. And so we've seen real trend toward people will come in and say, well, I want to design this house, or I want to design this office, and I want to go green. I say, okay, well, what does that mean to you? Going green, because you're going to build in California, it's already going to be green. Just by the nature of the code, it's going to be. So if you want to go above and beyond that, and we'll have that conversation. But most things come full circle. We've done a few things out of a technology called insulated concrete form, or ICF. In fact, Holy Cross Church was one of those. That was the second building we had done, where it's actually the styrofoam blocks that you fill with concrete.
Okay.
And so those are really energy efficient, and they resist everything, bugs and mold and anything. That kind of trend to using that. We've done now a couple of homes using that, and we've done, 3 or 4 other businesses with it. So there's been a few of those more modern. I've had some people come and say they want to do hay bale homes, but those have never went across the finish line. They kind of go, those kind of go more in the Midwest, I think. But a few people have asked about them. So that's kind of where right this minute, as far as California has been driving this, claiming that there's a housing shortage. Well, I don't really agree with that assessment, but they say there's a housing shortage. So the state is kind of putting this overlay on all of local government, which I also don't agree with, where they say you can build more homes on smaller pieces of property. You can take an existing piece of property, divide it 4 ways, put 4 different homes on there, as long as you're no smaller than 1,200 square feet for the lot and 800 square foot for the home, and you're closer to 4 feet to any of those property lines. Well, you just put you're just going to put almost 4 times more water usage on one
Right.
property as well. And what about fire danger, and exiting and those types of things. But anyway, the state's done that, and so there's going to be a trend toward more multifamily, more sort of low income housing that's coming in that'll be subsidized. So a lot of that is happening on the housing side.
How much did COVID affect you? You see the housing market obviously going up a little bit and materials going up. How much was COVID a factor in your job?
It was really interesting. So the construction industry was one of those that really wasn't as negatively affected as many industries that just kept going the whole time. Yeah. And so since, architecture, we're preparing those plans for the construction industry, we also continued. And in fact, was actually a pretty big year. 2020 was actually a pretty big year. And I theorize that people are during the lockdowns, people were sitting at home because they couldn't go to work or they're working from home and they're going, I hate this house. Now that I've had to live.
Yeah.
I either want a totally new one or want to remodel. There was a bunch of remodels in 2020. And I think kind of the same thing with businesses. People said, well, people are working from home. Maybe that'll be part of our new model. Maybe we can downsize a little or buy another place that's smaller and more efficient. So there was some shifting that happened that I think kept construction and architecture pretty well moving during that time. Now, recently with the supply chain issues driving prices way up on construction materials, I would have thought that would have stopped construction in its tracks, but it really hasn't. It's really continued to go.
Yeah.
So
what's the future of Townsend Architectural Group look like?
So it's a great question. It's real interesting because we're right on a transition right this minute. So I had thought whenever I was elected that I would probably sell the company, but there was of course that was touch and go because you got to get elected first, right? Or else you just sold your company and you don't have a job.
Yeah.
So I had planned if I got elected to go ahead and move forward. So we had a plan in place, had a company that was looking at it, had a guy that was going to manage the company, and I was going to work as a consultant there, just pull my footprint out of it a little bit. That plan didn't work out, and so the guy that was going to manage it, though, he needed a place to. He's an engineer, and he needed a place to land in Porterville. And I said, well, why don't you use this office? And so his name's Logan Couch. I don't know if you know Logan or not, but Logan is a local guy. Grew up here. His dad's a contractor. We worked together way back at Ennis Homes, and so I've known Logan for a long time. He originally was thinking about going into architecture, so he studied for it, and then he decided he'd rather make money, so he went into engineering. And anyway, so we put Logan in a spare office and said, go ahead and just use that. And if we need anything engineering, we'll just ask you for it. Well, this last year has just been us partnering on a lot of different projects, engineering and architectural projects. And so we are starting January 1, we will be partners in Townsend Architectural Group. We may change the name. We're still talking about that. And then I'm going to, over the next few years, start to back down my percentage of ownership so that he can just take that over, and it'll probably become more engineering centric. It just depends on what happens. We have a young lady we're trying to schmooze to get back here to, once she gets her architectural license, maybe to come back, and that would keep architecture alive if we can get someone here. But I'll do it pretty much as long as he'll have me. I'll probably keep doing it. I'm like I said, I'm running for the supervisor's office again. They're 4-year terms, so if I can get elected on this next one, I'll serve 4 more. And in my mind, I'd really like to do another 4 the way things are going right now, because awesome. I'm loving it. I'm loving the way I'm plugging into different associations and affiliations, and so at the same time, it'd be nice to have a place to land and keep that architecture alive as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. The 5th District Supervisor. What does that title mean, and why are you so passionate about it?
Yeah, so every county, I learned this actually after being elected, that every county, there's 58 counties in California. Everyone has 5 districts. no matter what the size of the county is. They all have 5 districts, and except for San Francisco, they have 13. Yeah. They're the only one.
It's a lot more than 5.
A lot more than 5. But anyway, so that was the way that it was set up by the state as the state was subdividing into counties all those years ago. So so we're divided into 5, and those are separated up into by population. So we each have pretty equal population. We just did a redistricting to keep those populations about the same between districts. I'm in the fifth district, and that basically takes in Porterville is sort of the northwest corner of the 5th district, and then it goes east all the way to Inyo County. So it takes in all of the mountains and goes all the way to Inyo County, and it goes south all the way to Kern County, to the Kern County line. So so that's basically my district. Now we have with the new counts, we have about 95,600 some odd people in each district that I represent. The board itself acts as sort of the board of directors for the county. So if the county were a big corporation, they would be the board of directors of that. And they're elected for 4-year terms and oversee every division of the county. So you have, of course, law enforcement, the sheriff's department, you have our fire department, you have the resource management agency with all the, the building permits, the roads, the environmental programs and things that are all under there. And then we also facilitate state programs. And really we have our budget is about $1.4 billion for this year. And a lot of that is really passed through programs through the state and some through the federal government. But we're the ones that are hiring the people to facilitate those programs and running those. So when I became involved, I'm still learning. Mm-hmm. I'm in my 3rd year now, and what has blown me away about this position is the scope, because I'm just scratching the surface. I mean, almost monthly, I'm learning. Oh, we deal with that too.
Yeah.
Oh, that's another thing. Didn't know that, But I've talked to people that are elected that are elected officials at the state level and at the federal level, and we go on lobbying trips to talk to them about our county issues at the state and federal level. And to a person, every elected official I've talked to, they always look and say, "You guys have the best job. The supervisor is the best job." Well, how come? I said, because you're closer to people. Because and you can imagine if you're at the state or federal level, if you want to get something done, there's a lot of bureaucracy. There is a lot of red tape that happens to get something done. At the county level, there's 5 people. So if you can get 2 other people to think the way that you think, you can pass something. Mm-hmm. Not that we're passing legislation, but you can change an ordinance, or mm-hmm. Or you can prioritize something. So there's only 5 of us to deal with. I'm pretty proud of the fact that even though we're extremely varied as a board. I mean, we go from left to right, all the way across the spectrum. We're probably as different as 5 people could be, yet almost all of our decisions have been 5-0 votes.
That's awesome.
Yes, we'll pound the table, and COVID presented some issues, and there have been those few things that come to the fore. But when you're talking about, do we support, our public safety? Is that our priority? Yeah, that's our priority. I mean, that's what we do. When I'm chair in a couple of years, if I get reelected and get elected chair, which is that's the kind of the plan, I'm going to really hit infrastructure hard. Just what else can we do? How can we break this ceiling of the budget that we have, for our roads and bridges? And we're working on it really hard, but that budget, boy, we just keep banging up against it. But anyway, all those things come through, and it's just super interesting. I love that you can call me and say, "Dennis, I have this issue," and I can go, "Okay, I've never dealt with that one before. Let me see." I can call chief of staff and say, "Who do we talk to?" She can find out.
That's awesome.
And it goes to a department head, and they get back to me. And I love the fact that it's usually within a day or two. they get back and say, okay, here's the answer to the problem. Here's how we're going to fix it. It's that
awesome.
quick. And I love that about it.
Awesome. So obviously you're on your third year. What are some of the things that, you're most proud about that you've been able to accomplish so far?
Yeah. Okay. And well, one of them again is that we were talking a little bit about being conservative fiscally with this board. That when a lot of counties were struggling through the pandemic and really even pre-pandemic, just struggling cyclically with their budgets, Tulare County has been very strong. We've had money put away for a rainy day, and this board has kept that. Has kept that in place, and we're continuing. We've got a great CAO, Jason Brett, that has got wonderful ideas and very conservative. Sitting down talking to him personally about how what we're going to do with the future. So with just the strength of the financial strength of the county, I'm really proud of that. I love the fact that we've been able, like this year, we were able to purchase 11 new pieces of fire apparatus equipment for the fire department, fire engines, fire trucks, things like that. That had been a long time coming, and we all say it's our priority, and yet we all bump against the budget, and we were able to get creative this year, and we were able to do that. And so we had, just a few weeks ago, they brought a couple of the big engines. One's going to be stationed in Springville, which I'm really happy about. And then they had a revamped big van that will serve as, or has already served as, command center for fires. We've been able to give them the tools that they need. We've done the same with the sheriff's department. So on the other side of that, public safety. Being able to give them the equipment that we need. We had an antiquated dispatch. It was in the basement of the old county jail. We're moving it right this minute. It's going online right this minute. It's brand new, state of the art, over on Acres now, where the sheriff and the fire departments both are housed. It's right there, and it's beautiful, and it's going to just bring us in. It's going to just bring us up to date and even put us a little bit ahead of the game with communications. That's everything from, car to car to plane to radio to radio. I mean, it really is streamlining things. And so I'm really proud of the fact that we're able to put that together. Another thing is just some of the inroads that we've been able to make with. Let me back up one second. One of the things that a friend of mine told me said an effective supervisor gets to know the representatives of your state and federal elected officials. He said, not the elected officials necessarily, their representatives, their local reps. And I thought, wow, that's going to take several years to put together, just to build that. Well, within the first year, they're reaching out because they want to have that connection as well. Mm-hmm. And so been able to make friends with, to text back and forth, to email back and forth, to call, some of our state and federal elected officials, representatives, whenever things are coming up that we can partner on. And so having that in place so quickly and having such a great relationship with them, really happy about that. And I'm really excited about the future of that as well as we face, different challenges, to be able to reach out to them and they can reach out to me. I was appointed last year, or for this year actually, to be the rural county representatives of California, our delegate, and it was 37 until last week, and then we voted Santa Barbara County in as our 38th member county. So we have 38 counties that are in the rural county representatives of California. I'm really excited about being the delegate to that group because those 38 counties share issues that are just exactly the same. It's water, it's roads, it's farm to market, it's right. Forest management, all those things, agriculture, we share. We also belong to the California State Association of Counties. I'm on 2 of the committees there. That's all 58 counties, but those issues are a little more varied. They're not as focused on our issues. And so we're a little more diffused, I guess, in that group. Whereas the rural county representatives, I'm very happy with. So that's another thing. I'm proud to be the delegate there, and I'm going to be being more active with the National Association of Counties as well, which really leads the fight in lobbying at the federal level. So trips to Washington, talking to the representatives there and arguing our county concerns.
What have been some of the biggest? I mean, you've kind of talked about the successes and what you're most proud of. What have been some of the biggest challenges so far?
So the big deal, a couple of big deals right now. So COVID hit. I was actually in Washington, D.C. Our CAO, two other supervisors, our chief of staff were all in Washington, D.C. doing our lobbying trip. We had just come from Congressman McCarthy's office. We just met with him personally, and and then they gave us a tour of the Capitol. There's a private tour of the Capitol, and we left the Capitol that evening. We were probably one of the last ones out of there, walked across Capitol Hill to my hotel, turned on the TV, turned on Fox News, and they said they just closed the Capitol for COVID, just shut it down. So we were probably the last ones in there, right?
Yeah.
And so great. And so the next day, Capitol Hill was a ghost town. I had to hunt around to find a place to eat breakfast before I got on my plane, and the airport actually looked like a ghost town. Until I got to my connector flight, then that was crazy. But anyway, so that night after that had happened, we had also had a dinner with our lobbyist over there. And as we're walking back across again Capitol Hill, we're taking pictures at the Capitol of it all lit up, and how beautiful it was. Our CAO got a call, and we had our first COVID case in Porterville. And so we're all looking at each other, and I'm looking at he says, well, we had our first COVID case. I said, okay, so what do we do now? He said, well, we need to declare a state of emergency. And I said, well, there's 3 of us here. The other 2 are still back in Tulare County. What do we do? So the 3 of us put our heads together. We said, okay, we're good with it. Let's do it. Called the other 2, did an emergency thing and declared it. And from then on, that next year was just nuts. Because there was just regulation after regulation, closures and all this, all of the challenges that happened. So that was one. But as if that weren't enough, we had last year, the biggest fire in Tulare County's history happened mostly in my district, right, with the Sequoia Complex fire. Mm-hmm. And then this year we had the K&P and the Windy fire, the Windy being in my district, which were, again, when you combine those two, it was again more acres than the previous year with the SQF fire. So we've had the 2 largest fires in Tulare County history, and we had COVID at the same time. And now we're implementing the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that came down from the state, or SGMA, which limits groundwater pumping. So our industry in Tulare County is agriculture. And agriculture uses water. Yeah. So now our main industry is going to be limited by the amount of groundwater that can be pumped. So we're having to, I serve on the Eastern Tule Groundwater Sustainability Agency as the county's member, and we've had to put together our groundwater sustainability plan, submit it to the state. The state's given us a little pushback, I noticed last week. But where we're going to have, we've had to figure out how are we going to do this and ramp down to the sustainable yield that we can pump out of the ground by 2040. So there's a lot of challenges going on.
You got your work cut out
right
for you. I applaud. We applaud you.
So I kind of have a question. So Dennis, you say you're right where you need to be, and you stay so enthusiastic. How do you stay so enthusiastic with all those challenges up ahead of you?
Yeah. So I wasn't looking for this job. Actually, in fact, I had a couple of friends said, "Did you bump your head? I mean, come on, you're a successful architect. People like you. You're involved in all these things in town and all these organizations. And why would you put yourself into the political arena where immediately, half the people are going to hate you? That was the deal." And I said, "No, that's, and I went in. And so when I was considering it, I considered that, what about that? And so literally the first one, whenever, I said Mike Ennis kind of had told everyone I was going to run for his position. I didn't even know he wasn't running again. So it wasn't even on my radar at all, but he had told everybody that. And so I had found that out, and I said, boy, I went home that evening and I told Cece, my wife, and I figured, I'm going to just ask her what she thinks about it. Yeah. And I figured it would be a double thumbs down, absolutely not getting into that, blah, blah, blah. I figured, and And so I told, hey, babe, this is what happened today. What do you think about this? Me running for supervisor. And she was quiet for just a second. And she said, she goes, how we pray every morning before you leave? And we do. We pray every morning before I leave to go to work. And I said, yeah, I know. And she goes, there's one thing you pray for every single time. Well, I didn't know what that was, right? I can't remember, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I said, no, I don't. What is it? And she goes, you pray for direction. Every day you pray for direction without fail. And she goes, this sounds like direction from God, to run this way. And I went, wow, that's pretty heavy. And it was. That was a heavy realization right there that I pray for it. And here it is dropped in my lap that everybody's encouraging me. And I was questioning it, but I still, even at that, first I went, yeah, boy, you're right. But it still took me a few weeks. And I asked, my mom was in the hospital at the time. She had broken her hip and she was in the hospital. So I went over to visit my mom. And I said, Mom, what do you think of me running for county supervisor? And she said, what's county supervisor?
The golden question.
And I said, well, it's what Mike Ennis does. And because she knew Mike Ennis, because they went to church together years ago. And so she knew him. And I said, it's Mike Ennis's job. It's what he's been doing. And she goes, oh, that. She goes, yeah, you were born to do that. That's the word she said to me. This is my mom, the person I respect most in the world, right? Says you were born to do that. And I just went, wow, that is really heavy, now. So now I'm really into it. So it still took me a little while. But every single person that I asked said, oh yeah, for sure. You need to do it. Slam dunk. And so I went for it. And then still I wasn't comfortable with it until I took the oath of office. And I had Cece there holding the Bible. The judge was in front of me. I raised my right hand, other hand on the Bible. And at the end of it, when I said the last word of the oath, I had a feeling come over me that probably I've never experienced before. There was such a certainty that this is where you need to be right now.
That's awesome.
And it was just peaceful, and it was just no more concern about whether or not. It was all 100%, this is where you need to be. And so I still feel that way right now. And that's why, as the next one came up, it's just like, oh yeah, I'm running again. Yeah. If the people have me, I'm ready.
What a blessing.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy to think about. Your mom told you, you need to do something. Like, she kind of guided you in the way of the architect job, and then she guided you the way to where you're at now. And it's
very true.
It hasn't changed within, the span of your lifetime, and she's just guided you the whole way. And just the power of a mom, that's awesome.
And she was the she was the mentor to the entire family and anybody within earshot.
That's awesome.
Because she led by example. Yeah. She led by example. Yeah.
So Dennis, you're of service, whether it's through what you're doing right now with county supervisor or just all the philanthropy, the community service, and the being a community leader, all the things you do. Is that driven back to your parents, and or is it just following, being a follower of Christ, or just kind of everything put together?
Kind of both. Dad, Noble was really good at that. He did a few things. He was a social worker for welfare, which if you knew him, you'd think, he couldn't be a social worker for welfare, but he was, and he was good at it. And when he retired from it, they pulled him back and he went into Child Protective Services for a while, which is another one where you just go, wow, that's really something. But I remember as a kid that Dad would throw Donnie and I, my younger brother Donnie and I, he'd throw us in the truck and with a whole bunch of bags, and they were just like the plastic trash bag, big, full of, we didn't know exactly what they were full of the first time, but they were full of children's gifts and clothing and food. And he would take us to some places where you would think, Dad, you probably shouldn't take us in this neighborhood, after dark like this. But it would usually be, Christmas Eve or right around that time, or Thanksgiving, one of the holidays. And he called me Rufus. He called Donnie Squire. He'd say, Rufus and Squire. He goes, grab a couple of those bags and go down to this, this door, knock on this door. When they open it up, just say, whoever answers the door, just say Merry Christmas and hand them these bags. So, okay, well, what are they? We finally figured out what they were. And so I said, well, Dad, you were pretty hard nosed as far as being a social worker. The scams that are out there and all that. He goes, yeah, but I also know where the real need is,
Wow.
So underneath that kind of crust that was there, he actually had that heart that there are people that really need help. And so, some of that I think helped to instill that community service in there. And then people would just reach out and say, hey, you need to belong to a Rotary, or hey, we would like to have you on the Hospital Foundation board, or could you serve on Habitat for Humanity's board? And, when they'd ask, and you just have a hard time saying no whenever they're good causes, so you end up on several boards.
Which one of those, like you said, the Habitat for Humanity, which one has given you, I guess, the most joy and the most, just been the most fulfilling, I guess?
Yeah. They're all kind of in their own way,
Sure.
because Rotary's a bigger, Rotary you can do for a couple of reasons. One, you can just be making contacts, networking, but the other is through service, and their service extends, internationally. And so we've been involved in a lot of pretty cool projects internationally. Probably the freshest one. Well, I was going to say the Hospital Foundation board. That's very focused because we're raising money for Searview Hospital, and I really love that, because especially in these times, you see how hard they're working and the things they're going through, and so it's been great to be able to, help purchase equipment that's needed to do the procedures there, and also recently to help with the nursing staff. Just to provide them some fun times and some food and some gifts and things to say thanks for the work that they've been doing. So that's great. Habitat's been a real interesting one because I can be involved in so many levels. I really kicked against joining that one because I was on enough boards and things. And so Denise Marchant had asked me a few times. She's pretty persuasive, and she eventually got me to do it. But I immediately said, well, I'll serve on here. I was a volunteer coordinator for two of the builds, and getting all the different trades together to build these homes. But the thing that's really cool is I'm able to donate the plans for the houses, and there's a connection there because with Harmony Magnet Academy, they have students out there that are going to be architects or engineers or other kinds of designers. And so one of their projects is to design Habitat for Humanity homes. And so what we've been able to do is go and partner with them. I go into the classroom, interact with the students, and end up choosing one of those students to come back to my office and design and create the complete set of construction documents for these Habitat homes. That's been really cool.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, because they can see it go from it was a classroom project to now it's you're actually designing for someone, and then see it built, and even go on the site when it's being built, and then be at the dedication ceremony where they turn the keys over to the owner and let the student be there. That's pretty fulfilling.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. Just to instill that into those kids, those high school kids, right? And hopefully they'll be able to take that into their own careers.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, as we kind of wrap things up, Dennis, what's next for you? That's my biggest question, because obviously it seems like you've fulfilled so much, and obviously you're going to go back in and do your thing as fifth district supervisor. Right. So, what else is next for you, Dennis?
Yeah. So that that's going to take up a lot of the time with what I talked about with the Townsend Architectural Group, the transition that's going to be going on there, which I'm really excited about. I think that's actually going to cause more business, not less, whenever we do that. So there's going to be a lot happening there. And then with should the people reelect me on this next upcoming election, then I will be the vice chair for the board for next year. We'll find out on January 4th about that one, and then chair the next year should I get reelected, and should the board choose. But also, I would be the delegate, continue to be the delegate for our CRC that I mentioned before. Try to get more involved now with the National Association of Counties, and then continue our affiliation with the California State Association of Counties. I'm just really looking forward to plugging in even more at our county level, but also expanding that influence. Our our CAO, I was talking to our CAO of the county the other day, and he said this board has been way more active than any other board that he's seen in federal and state issues, and in weighing in on those issues. And I think it's just because there's a lot more activity happening out there, and we feel the need to be commenting a lot more. And so I'm excited about the network that's being built, where I and we as a county and we as those affiliated counties can have more say at the state and federal level about things that are going on. Because truly, when somebody makes whether it's an executive order, at the federal level or at the state level, an executive order is made, it affects us right here at this level.
Right.
And a lot of times we typically don't have a say in it, and it would just be really nice to have more of a say. And so that's kind of a key, is going to be a key, is doing the work here, but also seeing if we can be a better influence over the time at the state and federal level as well.
A couple last little kind of topics here, and you mentioned these before. We've just recently seen these, the biggest forest fires in Tulare County history. What are your thoughts, and kind of what have you seen with the forest and fire management? Like what needs to happen? What are we lacking?
Right. Well, there's been so there's various agencies that are working on the forest. Most of the forest is Forest Service. We've either got the National Forest or now the Giant Sequoia National Monument, which takes up most of the forest here. We have a little piece that's controlled by the state, which is the Mountain Home State Demonstration Forest. So that's the state has that. So CAL FIRE takes care, manages that forest. And then we have Balch Park, which is right there adjacent to it. So they also help us with that management. What we saw in I remember driving up during the Sequoia Complex fire, Jim Patterson from Fresno, his assembly district comes right down to the Three Rivers area. And he wanted to come up on this side of the hill and kind of look back that way to see, because the fire was headed north from our area towards that, and he wanted to see if it was going to make it to his district. So Sheriff Boudreau and Chief Norman, Tulare County Fire, and Assemblyman Patterson, myself, and then a contingent of CAL FIRE people and some Forest Service and things, all drove up into Balch Park while the fire was still burning, right? Well, what they didn't know is I had been up there probably a month earlier to see some of the prescribed burns that were happening on the park and on the demonstration forest. And so they were talking about the forest supervisor up there on Mountain Home, Jim Kroll, was telling me how they light these fires and how they let them creep along the ground. And so when a fire does come through, it will have much less fuel. They take care of the ladder fuels, in the forest. They log out of there. They do selective logging out of there. So all these forest management techniques. Well, so sure enough, as we're driving up into this, you can see fires burning everywhere, devastation of what's going on or had already happened. And then as we get into Balch Park, we pull in, we get out of the cars, and I remember the assemblyman, I was standing right next to him, he looked up and he said, "Where's the fire?" When we got into the park, and everybody's standing around, and we go, well, it's already come through. There was no, everything wasn't blackened. There wasn't, all kinds of smoke going on.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason was all of that management had been done before. So when it hit, it did burn through there, but it just didn't burn up anything because there wasn't any fuel. So it kind of went on through and went around and went to where there was more fuel. And so that kind of inspired me to do a video. So our county agencies put together a video using people from CAL FIRE, using people from the Giant Sequoia National Monument, using people who had lost their homes in the fires, to talk about more active forest management and the difference. Because we had right there, you could see where a small portion of the forest had a really active management on it, and the broader portion of the forest had a more hands-off approach taken over the last maybe 30, 40 years.
Sure. Had
been taken on that. And where all the devastation was where you had a less active approach. And so what we're working really hard, and I think the federal government is I think everybody kind of opened their eyes when we lost so many of the giant sequoias, in these last two fires. I think it started to put people together, whether you're a logger, whether you're an environmentalist, whether you're a politician, firefighter, whoever you are. I think you said, okay, whatever we've been doing for the last 30 years is not working.
Yeah,
We gotta do
clearly.
something different. You know, we might have been arguing about it before, but now it's just like, okay, stop. It didn't work. We lost, you know, a huge percentage of our giant sequoias, or the world supply of giant sequoias, right? Because we only have them over here. So everybody's kind of getting together around that, and I think the federal government, there's some hopeful signs that they're saying, okay, let's do a little more active management. Let's start a little more prescribed burning. Let's remove some ladder fuels. Let's start doing some selective logging. Again, let's get rid of the biomass that's on the forest floor so that we don't have that kindling for the next fire. Now, can we do it quick enough? I hope and pray we can.
One of my last topics was the water management or water concerns for any farmers or anyone that's involved in agriculture. Where kind of all of us are in one way or another, right? What can what's coming with the water? This new legislation and the droughts that we've seen. What can they look forward to, or the concerns that are coming up?
Yeah. Well, obviously, we're anytime we see rain and snow, everybody gets really tickled because that's going to help in the long run. But we do have this overarching legislation with SGMA that is being implemented now, and so we have this fight. In our case, we have a 5-year ramp down period that we're doing to our sustainable yields, and so the Eastern Tule has put together that plan. Thankfully, everybody except for myself and the City of Porterville representative, Monty Reyes. Besides us two, the rest are all farmers, and they speak water. I'm learning to speak water, but they speak it. And so as we've been designing that, we've been doing it with an eye towards the least impact possible on the farmer, because no matter what, we're going to ramp down to, I think the number right now is 1.06 acre feet per acre. If you're farming oranges, that you need about 3 times that, right, to farm oranges. So if you're only getting your water from the ground, if you don't have any surface rights, what are you going to do? You need 2 times more water, 3 times more water than what you're getting. And so, the plan is to have other properties where then you can use credits from those to go on the more productive properties, or to do water banking, where in the good years you can put that water back into the ground, sinking ponds, retention basins, recharge basins. So all of those types of things working together, and then working on trying to get more surface deliveries. That's the other side of that coin, is that's a political thing, because you have environmental interests that are keeping water coming from the delta, south of the delta. So when you get zero allocation of surface water, where else are they going to get it except for pumping it? And that's that's exacerbating the problem. You have drought. You also have the political problem of lack of release of the water, and now you've got all of the farmers having to deal with it. So we've got there's federal, state, and local monies coming together to fix the Frank Kern Canal, which will help with those deliveries once there is water coming to south. We'll get that fixed. It's a $500 or $600 million project, so the monies are coming from the different areas. So that's being worked on right this minute, and then the water banking is being worked out right at this minute. There is a market that's out there now, but we are going to be still, with all of the creativity that's going on, we're still going to be very challenged, especially the small farmer. I think it's going to be very challenged to keep everything alive. If you can't just go out and buy more property than you need and use those credits, then you're going to be at a disadvantage. So we know that there's going to be quite a bit of land fallowed. So we're going to be dealing with not only with how do you keep the farmers alive, but then what do you do with that fallowed land that we know is going to be coming over the next many years.
Yeah, thank you. And with everything that you've done, all the stuff that you continue to do, what advice would you give, whether it's a college kid that wants to go into architecture, or maybe someone that wants to kind of step step into the political world, to be an elected official, what are some pieces of advice you would give them to be successful?
Sure. I think with any business opportunity that you have, especially, you've got to love what you do. You really do. I mean, I know you have to I know you have these periods of your life where you go through jobs that you're doing just to get to the next job. But when you're thinking about a career, make sure it's something that you love. Make sure it's something that you're passionate about. It's not necessarily the money that you make. I joked a minute ago about architecture and engineering, but I don't like engineering. I like architecture. Right. I could have chosen engineering, but I'm more passionate, about architecture. So some people, when they're going into it, I'll say, do you like it? Do you like the design part? Do you like the creativity part? Do you find yourself sketching? Do you, are you okay with math? But you find yourself sketching a lot. Do you have that balance of,
right.
And if they say, well, no, I don't like that whole creative side at all. Well, don't go into architecture. That's not going to be something you love because you're going to have to be creative. But if they say, man, I love those numbers. I love making, solving problems. Well, maybe engineering is where you're headed. And, but in any field, just make sure that you love it. Make sure that it was something. I've heard people say, make sure that you do something that you would do even if they weren't paying you for it. Right.
Yeah.
And then that's going to be successful. And with politics, it's like I joke with some of my friends, because they say, don't ever become a politician, and others are saying, well, you're a politician now, and so it's like, what is it? I don't know. But the thing is, I do really feel like, as I shared with you earlier, that this was a calling, because I think that it has to be servant leadership. If you're going to do something like this, you have to remember you're not doing it for the money. You're not doing it for fame or recognition or power or any of that. You have to be doing it. Any form of politics should be a public servant, to say that I want to get things done for the people that elected me to office. Once you lose that, you've lost sight, and you'll end up being part of the swamp that we all talk about, right? I don't want to be part of the swamp. I want to do what the people are asking me to do, and I've loved it to this point. I think I'll continue to, as long as they'll have me.
That's awesome.
Well, we appreciate it, and just thank you for everything you're doing.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So our last segment is going to be somebody who means something to you. Obviously, you've had a lot of success in what you do. It's called Freedom Fighter of the Week, where it's someone you can recognize that's kind of molded you to kind of where you're at. And I kind of want to know who that is for you.
So, and I've mentioned a few of them already, right?
Going
through here. But you know what? I'm going to, for this one, I'm going to tell you my wife. I'm going to tell you about my wife. My wife, Cece, because I talked about that cute little cheerleader, back in 1977, all those years ago. But honestly, I was so deathly afraid of doing things like we're doing right now, just this kind of an interaction, and especially if it's with women or big crowds. I literally, at one time in a Bible study group, they were talking about the gifts of the Spirit and what God's plans may be for your life, and I literally told God, I will do anything for you except public speaking. I don't ever want to be put in front of a crowd. I don't ever want to have to speak in front of a microphone. I don't ever want to have to do. I'll do anything else. Yeah, and within a year, I was already involved in teaching Bible studies out of our home after I had said that to God. So he's got a sense of humor, but he really used Cece because she was the extrovert. She immediately, when we started dating, started taking me to where there were groups of people, whether it's family or friends or parties or events or whatever, just started dragging me to these things and putting me out in public, which I was very, very uncomfortable with. And she was, social butterfly, go around, talk to everybody. And I was just wanted to go to the corner, just wanted to stand in the corner. Don't talk to me. Don't bother me. And over the years, she, and God working in concert, pulled me out of that. And she is very much very focused on what is right, not what's expedient, not what will get you through. We're talking about politics, not what will get you through politically, but what's right. You need to do what's right. And so there's a lot of times when people come up and pat me on the back and say, man, that was a great decision. Thanks for standing up for that. Well, guess what? Cece was standing right there saying, you need to do this. You need to do that. Hey, have you done this yet? Have you thought about this? Because she's got such a sense of what's right and wrong, and such a sense of justice and patriotism, and wanting to see the country go, the right way, that she has over our lifetime together since 1977, that she's been right there helping to shape really who I am. So, the Bible talks about your spouse being your completer. She's definitely been my completer. I wouldn't be talking to you, I'm sure, in this capacity if it weren't for having met that little cute blonde cheerleader in 1977.
That's awesome.
Thanks for sharing that, Dennis. And as we end this conversation today, where can people reach you, whether they're in the District 5 or maybe reaching out for architecture? Where can they find you at?
Sure. Okay, I'll give you the county information first. So you can call the county line. It's just the 559 area code 636-5000. That will get you to a board rep, but all you have to do is tell them that you want to talk to Dennis Townsend, and they'll either shoot me a quick text or wherever I am, because I'm typically in my district and not over in Visalia. So, but they'll get you to me. And also it's just dtownsend@tulare.ca.gov. That's the email address. And then for architecture, our number's a little easier over there. It's the 559 area code 789-9999. And my extension is 11, goes directly to me for architecture. And that one's almost the same, dtownsend@townsendgroup.net. Will get you to me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Dennis, just for sitting down and speaking with us today. And I'm excited to see everything that you're going to be doing, and hopefully have another term in office.
Yeah, well, thank you. I should add to that real quick is Trust Townsend is the Facebook handle. So if you go to just Trust Townsend, there's a website and a Facebook there, and that's where I'm updating the Facebook all the time on events that are coming up and things that we've been doing as a county. So you can also check in on that. But thanks so much for the opportunity. It's great talking to you guys.
Okay, Dennis. Thank you for your time. And it's been an awesome conversation.
All right.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And good luck in next year in 2022.
Thank you.
Dennis.
All right. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode. We appreciate you and your support of the show. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave feedback on Apple Podcasts.